Thank you for joining us this week with Be With the Word. I've been really reflecting a little bit on these readings, and I've been reflecting on recent events, and it has been definitely a challenging few weeks as most of us are in some kind of lockdown or quarantine or just major social distancing and all kinds of worries, right? Worries about our health, worries about our finances, we're worried about people we care for, especially maybe parents and grandparents and other friends who have some kind of illness. And I definitely feel that, and I'm realizing that there are probably some triggers for me that kind of pop up with all of this, right? And as I reflect on it, one of the triggers might even be, um, going back to my childhood, and there were times that I can recall before my parents divorced, when my father was in and out of work pretty regularly. My mom was the constant. She typically she worked for the government, and that seemed like stability. It wasn't a high-paying job, but it was a stable job, and she was a stable parent. But the idea that there were times when we really weren't sure, you know, um, what we would be eating. I mean, we had food, but it might be spam. And I remember,
Spam.
yes, I have made it really clear that I will never eat spam. I won't eat spam sandwiches. I won't eat fried spam. I will not eat spam. I am Sam. I am. So, but there were times that finances were stressful, and even as a kid, you don't really need much in some ways, but there's a pressure. There's a not, when you're. I remember my dad being out of work. I remember there just feeling like a heaviness in the whole house, and I can remember him getting depressed. And he could be bad enough, but when he was depressed, it was especially bad, and it sort of brings up all those negative feelings. And then there were later times when it was, when it was just my mother and my sister and I, and things were sometimes very tight, and so on. It's funny, when I was in college, I was extremely poor, but I wasn't as stressed about it. I somehow got by with very little, and I don't know why, but that wasn't as much stress. Um, but anyway, why am I bringing all this up? I'm curious whether you might relate. I mean, there might be some of you that are very used to living in really difficult financial situations and having to be really resourceful. I know that I learned to be quite resourceful and learned how to get by. I find it actually harder now that I have more things and more responsibilities. Children, even though my children are grown, they still rely on us. One is still in college, and the pressure can sometimes feel even greater than normal if it was just me having to get by. But then I think what makes this particular time challenging is that it's not just, for example, I'm out of work and I have to just get by and find a way. It feels a little bit like our whole country is being threatened, for work and health. And there's an unknown. And I don't know about you, but unknowns are hard for me. It's a lot easier. I want to know all the facts. I could almost handle really bad things if I know about the facts. And it was funny. I was made to watch a slightly horror movie the other night called A Quiet Place. It's actually a
Mhm.
powerful movie. It's actually got an extremely pro-life theme to it, which really surprised me. And they discovered these aliens, but the weakness of the aliens, I guess, was that they could only hear. So everybody had to be super quiet, which is really crazy if you're trying to raise children, to keep your children quiet, like always quiet. But there's also the aspect of we really just don't even know who these aliens are. We don't know what they're capable of. And and they ended up finding, you have to find the weakness in the alien, as you have to in all these movies, but we don't know the weakness of this virus yet fully, and we don't know, we know we're gaining some information, but without perfect knowledge here, it's stressful. So I guess I'm bringing up to you that, I've had stress too, and I know I'm managing our Souls and Hearts Twitter account, and I'd love to see you on that. But it's also been disheartening just reading everyone's posts and their concerns for loved ones, and even some people posting about their own illnesses and starting to feel perhaps symptoms of this virus, and person after person, I may not know them well, but I start to recognize their names, and I see the beautiful things that many people post, the beautiful prayers, the beautiful saint quotes, the beautiful messages of love and kindness, even on Twitter. And yet it's hard to see people in pain, so I know that's difficult too. So that actually has raised my anxiety a little bit. And as a caregiver, who I've switched mostly to all video counseling now, I have to be strong for others and to be helpful, right? That's my role, my job. And I have helpful things to provide, but I also have to go home and be me in this world too. And sometimes that can be difficult, and managing my own anxiety in all of this and the things that it stirs up. So that's my little share. I don't know how well you might relate to it. We're going to get back here with Dr. Peter, because I know he's probably got some things he'd like to ask and some things to add, and we're going to get into a bigger discussion of the readings. By the way, and you can listen to those readings on our Hear the Word podcast, which is our parallel podcast, and they're long this time. And I do multiple voices this time.
That's true. Very
yes.
well, I might add.
There
was yes, an interpretation of the different characters within the gospel story.
I held back a bit, believe it or not. Like, I could have done like French Canadian accents or some weird Scottish accents, or worse yet, a Southern accent, which all my Southern friends would have really chastised me for if I had done that.
But it is, we're, so many of us are home, right? And we don't have access to being able to go to Mass. And I think this is the opportunity to hear the readings, I think is really beautiful one. So I encourage you to take advantage of that. Hear the Word. Yeah. It's also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. So you can find that there.
Yeah, we did that. We upped our Sunday morning prayer and evening prayer, and we did the whole Byzantine, and then we do the hours, and can stream Mass. And there's some churches, a number of churches in our areas that are streaming the Mass, which is nice that they're doing that. But if you want to have our readings, if you want to do the readings with us, I think it's a good supplement, especially during these times.
Right.
But that's a challenge, isn't it? Like, I know that a lot of people on Twitter, for example, and Facebook are talking about how difficult it is not to receive the Eucharist, in these times, and not to be able to go to Mass or the Divine Liturgy at all. And that it's such a challenge. Oh, you know what? There was a Greek Orthodox bishop in Greece, can't remember the name of the town, who was arrested because he refused to not do the Divine Liturgy. And and there's a part of me that knows, okay, I know what we all have to do to destroy this virus, and so we all do have to do what we're supposed to. But another part of me kind of goes, wow, what a hero. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not advocating what he did, but I understand why.
Yeah.
Because he wants to be faithful to what he believes God is calling him to do. That's more important than anything in this world.
Right.
Right. But anyway, I don't necessarily get into that discussion, but I just thought it was interesting to how people are handling this, and how, I know there's a part of me that just wants to go. And then, of course, there's another part that knows that I have to take care of my family and people and be a good citizen through this.
So I was really resonating with what you said. I have found that some of my clients who have had real adversity, especially when they were young, are actually thriving better in this environment than I would have expected. But also, like, they're no strangers to adversity, right? This isn't like in a lot of ways new to them, right? So I think in some ways it's like an opportunity to, like, have some of those experiences that we've had as kids really help us, right?
Right.
So I was sort of surprised by that, and I was reminded of it when you were talking about some of the difficulties when you were growing up and the uncertainties, especially around not knowing, right?
Right.
Because I think that's one of the things that kids really look to their parents, is to give that sense of security, to give that sense of safety. And when the parents are anxious, it makes it a lot harder for the kids to feel like things are going to be safe, because kids naturally look to their
Hmm.
parents, to provide
Yeah.
that safety and stability for them. So.
I think what might be, I like what you had to say. That's interesting to me. Um, that was true for me all through college, right? Like
Mhm.
I was used to sort of being a scrapper and you kind of get by.
Right.
But I think I got lazy or something. I got secure. I
Mhm.
got comfortable. And some of that was in my own ability. You know what I mean? Like I worked hard
Right.
to be able to be secure. And my wife has very secure work, and so I guess I got used to that, and I feel like maybe I earned it or something.
Right.
And so that being threatened all of a sudden, and really in a way that is different than just say losing your job and then you have to go find another one, which is bad
Right.
enough,
Right.
but to feel like, whoa, everything could collapse, that takes away my earned, so to speak, sense of security, and is forcing me to, I don't know, honestly, it's forcing me to have to rely on God more,
Right.
which is
That's the
not what I
thing.
want to do. To be perfectly, I always say I
Yeah.
do, but it's
Yeah.
not actually easy to do.
Well, there's parts of us that don't trust God. I mean, there's parts of me that don't trust that God's going to take care of me. I mean, I don't like to admit that, but they're likely to go back to, those parts of me are likely to go back to figuring it out, right? So I found myself, taking in all this information from the internet with the unspoken fantasy that if I just could wrap my mind around what was going on here, that I would be better able to adapt. And my wife then asks me, how does any of that reading change what you're going to do, right? How is that going to, affect
Mm,
your action plans? And frankly, most of it doesn't change it at all.
mm,
There's a few things that are really important to know, um, but there is no way that I'm going to be able to leverage my position, through my efforts or through my intelligence or through my, preparedness or whatever, to be able to overcome this by my own strength. That's
no.
just, it's just not possible. There's too many interconnected parts here. So I think it's a tremendous wake up call for those parts of me, for me to like work with those parts of me and say, okay, guys, let's actually come back to God on this. Because when I do that, I am not inclined to pray. When I give myself over to just, binging on internet news on this
Mm,
thing, or
yeah.
reading epidemiological reports, which I'm
Is that
kind
what
of
you're
a
doing?
quant guy. Yeah, life cycle. In an attempt to predict how many cycles of this, and so forth. How long is it going to actually last? Things like that.
Right.
The bottom line is, I can't know.
Right.
I can't know. So yeah, it goes back to, okay, where am I looking for that security? Where am I looking for that safety? And so many times I'm able to slip out of
Mhm.
looking for it in God, right? Because as a little child, I need to find that in my parents. I need to find that in God the Father, and I need to find that in the Blessed Virgin, my mother, my
Mm,
primary parents.
yeah.
And when I hold on to that, and I have taken some days of fasting, whole days where I don't look at any of this stuff, I have had much better days, where I
Right.
feel much safer, much more secure, more able to get out of myself, and to give of myself to my clients, to my children, to my wife, to my friends, my family
Yeah.
members. So,
You know what? That's so good. And it relates to what our action item is going to be, because I was really impressed, honestly, with what this crisis, if you will, has forced some of us to do. Like I have a lot of relatives in Canada, and one of them decided, I guess we're having some kind of family chat on Facebook, and one of them decided to set up a time on Saturday for everybody to kind of come together, and we did. I didn't even know you could do a video on that
huh.
on Facebook, and so I got, there's my mother, I had a couple aunts, had cousins, two of my kids popped in, and we all and we're all there, and we all were laughing our heads off the whole time. And one of the okay, this is how I was embarrassed, because I couldn't do it because I was on my laptop for whatever reason, it didn't work. but I guess you have the functionality maybe on your phone. But they were all making their faces change, like into a pizza, or one of them a foot, or like ears, and so their faces. I'm sitting there looking at them, and we're all just. It was so silly and ridiculous, but we were all just laughing our heads off at everybody else's, what we're doing, and just
Right.
cracking stupid jokes. And my aunt has this funny. It's my aunt Dorothy. She sometimes comments on Souls and Hearts. My aunt Dorothy is one of my heroes. Honestly, she saved me during a time in my high school years that was very, very difficult. But she has, despite that, I love you, Aunt Dorothy, but she has this thing called Hugh, and it's this egg rock thing with a feather head and these little legs. And because she was hospitalized because she hurt her leg or knee or something, and so she's been actually, before this whole thing started, she's already been 30 days being stuck at home. Well, I don't know. She developed some attachment to this little creature called Hugh. She named it Hugh, and now she's posting every day on this creature. And I've been my little evil self. So I've been making fun of Hugh the whole time, like picking on it, telling her she should have 6 feet distance from it. Who knows where it's been? She sells Tupperware. I'm like, maybe you need to stick it in a Tupperware jar, like all these things. But you know what? The whole thing, but everybody else is playing it. The whole thing's all silly.
Right.
And my whole point is, wow, I haven't laughed that hard with my family in I don't know how long.
Yeah.
I haven't connected with people, and it took us this to get us to kind of reconnect.
Yeah. There was an op-ed. There was an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal with the title, "Mommy, I like the coronavirus," and it was written by a psychoanalyst who was listening to a client tell her the story of how much that client's daughter liked the coronavirus because mommy's home now, and mommy's more accessible, and mommy's more engaged, and so there's all kinds of good that's coming from this if we can hold on to it. But when we stray away, and we get away from like these real things, and we get into the fear and so forth, we get into this dark self-absorbed space. And so for you to be able to reconnect with your family like that is beautiful, and to have fun, to play. You're playing with them, right? And we could get distracted by a number of things that we don't have access to anymore. March Madness,
right.
The NBA season coming to an end, and into the playoffs, and any number of other things. So.
No. I think it's got some interesting potential, even though it also has the flip side of creating a lot of anxiety for many people. Yeah. And to me, the health anxiety is really challenging. Even if, we're kind of questioning ourselves, do I have it? If I have I'm really stuffy right now because it's allergy time in Georgia, and I already have bad sinuses, so I get nasal. So I'm always having this moment of, do I have this virus or not? And I hate I hate it that would get to me so much, but I can't help it. It feels like a threat that I don't really know.
Yeah.
And my wife is always reading the reports on the mortality rates in each country, and where we're ranking, where our ranks are. Did we go up? Do we don't go down? And then Georgia and all the different states and what, and I'm like, I do want that information, but I don't want it too much.
Yeah, the overload. And that's what the blog I wrote this week was about. It's about how to regulate, how to fast from all that information, because we're limited in terms of how much we can take it in. We're limited about how much we can handle.
Yeah.
I don't have as much concerns about the health stuff. I'm much more concerned about the socioeconomic aspects of this, and what happens when supply chains are disrupted, what happens when, sort of the typical ways of doing commerce and all of that happen. That's what I'm much more concerned about, because that can interrupt, medical supplies. It'll have a rippling effect throughout the whole economy. And I'm really into the finance, into markets, and that's a hobby of mine, is to kind of check out economic indicators and stuff like that. So that's what I'm more concerned about. So I can get very into gloom and doom scenarios, sort of apocalyptic types of images of things. And I can read things that support that. And on one hand, that's gratifying. On the other hand, it terrifies me. So yeah, people are going to worry about different aspects. I'm also concerned about my parents, right? Because my parents are older, and they have all the risk factors for being susceptible to this.
Mm-hmm.
And they're far away. They're
Yeah.
hard to get to. So I think there's going to be a different profile of things that worry us about this.
Yeah.
Different things are going to hit us in different ways, and a lot of it's because of our history. You
Yeah.
know, um,
Well, it's as a Canadian, it's hard. Like I have been calling my mom more because she lives alone, and
right,
I feel bad for her there, and I worry about her. And then my sister was worrying about me because she's like, Jerry, I can't come. Like we can't
right,
cross the border.
right,
If you
right,
needed me, we wouldn't be able to reach each other, and that creates a sense of, separation,
right.
a deeper sense of physical separation that is frightening, honestly. So, well, let's look a little bit at the
At the
readings. There's
readings,
so
yeah.
much that obviously we're not going to be able. That was a really long gospel reading, and there's so much in it, and we're not going to be able to kind of do that in 30 minutes. But I wanted to kind of at least point out the Isaiah readings.
Right,
The first thing that jumped out at me as a counselor was just the beginning where it says, "The Lord has given to me a well-trained tongue." And that I might know how to speak to the weary. And obviously, he's speaking to a prophet.
right.
So, to whatever extent counselors have a prophet charism. Um, but I thought that moved me. And I was alluding to that before that, if it's a gift to speak to the weary, to help people in distress, is a beautiful thing. But it also made me think, who cares for the prophets, the
Right,
counselors, and the
right,
helpers. And so that's where I need to get help too. I think it's helpful
right.
for me to reach out and not be alone and all that. But now the other line I thought was good is "I have not rebelled," he says,
Hmm.
and then that's to me I juxtapose that with Judas, right? Because there's a lot on Judas betraying Jesus, and so it's really a call to stay faithful and then the most important line here I just thought was so powerful in Isaiah 50. The Lord God is my help, therefore I am not disgraced.
Right.
I have set my face like flint, knowing that I shall not be put to shame. Now, I have to admit, I thought I kind of knew what that meant, and I just checked it to make sure I did. In fact, understand what it means to make your face like flint. That doesn't,
Hmm.
because that just sounds a little bit like a wall or something, maybe. But it's, as I understand it, it means to have determination,
Hmm.
right? It
Right,
means you're not going to give up. You're going to
right.
keep fighting, and I think that that's going to be one of the takeaways for this podcast today is don't give up. If you have to set your face like flint, it means this is not the time to run away. This is not the time. It doesn't mean you're not going to have anxieties or fears, but it's not the time to turn away from God. This is the time to be determined and to be diligent.
And that turning away from God is probably not going to be for most of us Catholics, that are struggling to live out the faith. It's usually not going to be, I hate you, God, I repudiate you. It's going to be like this forgetting. It's going to be like this losing track of,
Mm.
because our routines are all disrupted. Those of us that went to Eucharistic adoration, we don't have access anymore. Mass, no access anymore, right? So we're going to have to make these efforts to actually deliberately and intentionally reconnect with God, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
it's not just the hating God actively. It's the forgetting or the losing track of, or it being sort of overrun by the fears and anxieties,
yeah,
and our media saturated culture is great at luring us away from the truths of our sonship and daughtership in God the Father and in the Blessed Virgin Mary.
mm-hmm,
So we need our parents. We need our spiritual parents in this situation.
mm-hmm,
And so, yeah, setting a face like flint, right? It also just struck me that the shame doesn't come from outside. The shame would come from inside if there was shame, right? Like there's no shame in being attacked or beaten or having your beard plucked by others, being treated badly or being, mocked. The shame would come if we were to collapse inwardly. So,
mm-hmm. Interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
that is because we traditionally I think of shame being something that others impose on us somehow, right?
right,
Like it's them seeing me naked.
Right.
right? I won't feel shame running around my own house naked, but
Right.
if I ran outside
Right.
naked, I
Right.
would feel shame because of others.
Right.
But it seems like God is putting that on its head a little bit
Right.
with this passage.
Yeah, because it was a huge insult to pluck a beard, right? I mean, to pluck an Israelite's beard is
Oh
like
yeah,
that's a huge insult. And it's a shaming thing, right? It's intended to demean and degrade the other person.
yeah,
And there, basically what he's saying is, the Lord God is my help, therefore I am not disgraced. Because God is my helper, even under this circumstance where my beard is being torn out,
right,
I'm not shamed. I'm not disgraced.
yeah. No, no, wow, that's
So
amazing.
yeah,
Um, he really turns it on its head. What it
right,
means to be, um, you know, relying on God
right,
and not being disgraced,
right.
because you could be disgraced in an earthly way and not in a godly way, I guess.
Right, and
Um,
there's no lashing back, right? There's no bring down destruction on the enemy here, right?
right,
What Isaiah is doing is he's taking it, right, in that archetype of Christ. He's taking that without lashing out, and becoming vengeful, and
mhm.
so forth. So
Yeah, wow. Well, I want to just kind of point out too this line that Jesus does say in the very long gospel there,
hmm
that the spirit is willing and the flesh is weak.
yes,
Because I'm really torn between the whole Judas thing. You have whole Judas betrayal. You have Peter,
right,
who doesn't intend. Judas has already planned it in advance.
right,
He totally
right,
goes. So it's premeditated. Peter is just like, no, I would never do that, and then of course he does.
right,
And I think that's most of us. Most of us are Peters in this regard. Not most of us aren't Judases to that extent.
hmm
And yet, and I remember, I once had a priest say, this stayed with me forever, that the difference between Judas and Peter is that Judas didn't believe that God's mercy was greater than his sin.
right,
And I don't know, I heard that in high school, and that just sort of stayed with me all my life because I thought, wow, Peter, I mean, his sin maybe wasn't quite as bad, but he did deny Jesus completely,
right,
pretty blatantly. And yet he turned in true repentance and believed God would still love him and forgive him, even that much. And really the spirit is willing, like his spirit was willing. Like he was like, not me, oh my gosh.
mm,
But his flesh was in fact
weak,
weak.
yeah,
And when your life is threatened, like Peter's was, like his life would have been threatened. He was seeing
right.
Jesus being taken off to crucifixion. He was, who knows, the crowd could have turned on him.
Well, he was
That
the
would have
chief
been
of
it.
the apostles, and
Yeah,
when you put down leaders of insurrections, you also take out their generals, right? You take out their prime followers, and he was the next in command, right?
right,
Because he was the cornerstone, or the upon this
right.
rock I shall build my church.
Totally. So,
So
so to me, my anxiety in the last little while that comes and goes around this whole virus stuff is very much like me being a Peter
hmm
in this regard. Like I am, yeah, I'm all rah 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 Jesus, and then, but oh my gosh, what if it hits me, or what if
right,
my life falls apart? Then all of a sudden, I'm filled with anxiety,
right.
and it's hard to turn to God in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, and I struggle too with the can I provide for my family, because I've got 6 of my 7 kids at home, right? And I wonder about all those sorts of things, and in some ways it's a pride thing. I mean, can I do this by myself, right? Or
Mhm.
no? I mean, again, I've got to trust that God loves them as well. So
Yeah,
we lose track of these things, and our routines are being disruptive, and we have great opportunities here. And I had similarly, so there are times where I say, bring it on. I am ready for the challenge. I'm ready for the adventure. I want to do this. And then, I read about the death statistics, and I read about what's going on in New York and the hospitals being overwhelmed. And I'm like, whoa, and so it's like,
uh,
I resonate with what you're saying. And I think a lot of people out there are experiencing that.
mhm.
So the stresses are going to reveal the areas in our life that, still need to be perfected,
Yeah. So,
and help us with humility. so that we can recognize our littleness, um, and not operate under the illusion that we can actually control all of this stuff.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm throwing out as an action item for this week for people, excuse me, to do would be, make that decision for determination and perseverance. Like, in other words, sometimes you just got to say, I'm in the ring. I'm here. You know what I mean? Whatever happens. And one thing you can do in that is to reach out to someone. It doesn't, think of for me, it's my mother, perhaps, is one example. Like, just going, you know what? I need to call her more. I know I only call her once in a while, but I need to call her more often, so that, because she's alone and this is a scary thing. And really, you know, try hard. And I think you were telling me about this earlier, to priming the the empathetic connection or whatnot.
Right.
And that is, think about her perspective.
Yeah, just kind of put yourself in her shoes, and imagine what she might be worried about, maybe what she brought up in the last time you talked to her, and try to just kind of understand it from her point of view, so that, and kind of relate with her in that, like almost rehearsing it, like that, some aspects of that conversation, and because that starts to get you in that mindset of how can I reach out, right? Because
Yeah.
if we go into a conversation like that, self-absorbed and wrapped up in our own worries and concerns, then the kinds of things that she might be worried about could actually stress us out more, right? It could be kind of a negative interaction. So we want to be in a good place,
Right.
when we reach out.
hmm I think just this whole, life death questions just helps us to get out of some of our more petty or self-absorbed ways of thinking and looking at things. And it's not even, some of that stuff's not, we may be even right, like we may have a point, but when it comes down to it, is that really what we want to emphasize? Like, maybe we can put aside some of that and just focus on what we really do care about, and that's loving this person,
hmm
not
Yeah.
being so focused on my reaction to everything, which I know I have a tendency to do, um, with some people, especially family, right? Family has a way of triggering things. Like, we would never act like this with my friends, but
Yeah, especially with family, right? And so it's a real opportunity for us to uh, to um, to be mindful of the kinds of things that get in the way of us relating well, and just kind
yeah,
of take care of that before we call them, right? And to call them from a position of love. Sometimes we could still, even as adults, reach out to our parents and hope that even after so many years, they're gonna take care of the needs that we wish they would have when we were young, and
right,
that can be frustrating for everybody then, right?
yeah,
So it's good to do that after you've had a sense of reconnecting and having a sense of safety and security in your relationship with God. Because
yeah,
human beings may or may not grant that to you. I mean, there are people that wind each other up. There are conversations that you might have with family members where both of you wind up much
right,
more anxious afterward, because there isn't a base of safety and security in that relationship, and there is a kind of an activation that happens there, so
right.
you want to be mindful about that. So that might not be, you might want to think about, like, when's a good time to do this,
Yeah. Well, I think like, to me, there's this little paradox, because on one hand, I'm encouraging people to be determined,
Right.
right? That flint. And then I'm also suggesting surrender. I mean, I think we have to, and that's sort of like the letting go, and, not necessarily in the frozen way, but in the, like, letting go of my will, and letting, like Christ says, not my will, but yours, to the Father. And that's so hard, right? And so there's a combination of, what does it mean to be determined, to be faithful,
hmm
right? And maybe that's going to lead to an act. Like, maybe it's going to lead to calling somebody. Maybe it's going to help. You're going to help somebody. Maybe it's just going to be commitment to prayer, or whatnot. But at the same time, that's charging up. But at the same time, there's a surrender where we're letting go,
Right.
and
Right.
we're able to go, you know what? I'm not in charge of this universe. And, like, how I was saying earlier, I want to know. I want to know. I want to have all the
Right.
information. I want to make the right
Right.
decision.
Right.
And you know what? Honestly, yes, of course, we need to be good stewards sometimes and
Right.
be careful and
Right.
informed. But I can't know it all.
Yeah,
And I can't predict it all and I can't
yeah,
manage it all. And on some level, I have to say, God, it's in your hands.
right, right.
And that's hard.
It's, especially when we might have interpreted some of our experiences like Psalm 22, my
Mm-hmm.
God, why have you abandoned me? Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you read through that whole psalm, there is a setting of my face as flint at the end, right? There's an affirmation that I am going to believe,
Right.
and um,
But,
so that
I love that. Like, to me, I remember having way back in my undergrad, having to do a theology class on the Hebrew scriptures and learning about the Psalms. And there's the Psalms of Lamentation, the Psalms of Thanksgiving. And what I think is so amazing is that God gives us the freedom to lament. He gives us the freedom to have that range of emotion and get it out. But it all ultimately ends up leading to a surrender to him, so it's almost like the Psalms show us the process.
right, and it's not so that God can understand what we're experiencing, because he
Right.
knows. He knows all the emotions that we're suppressing or denying, or that we've shoved into the unconscious, that we won't deal with. The reason we need to express it is so that we know what we're experiencing, right?
Right.
So that we connect with our own experience, because otherwise it's going to be hard for us to have that calm, soothed, healed by God,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm.
Because otherwise he would have to do that without us being a part of that, and that would be too intrusive and too invasive.
Right.
So
Yeah,
would
no,
violate our dignity.
it's not about God needing to know. He knows.
Right,
It's about he understands we have an emotional
right.
process that
Process.
has to happen. And it's not easy for us to always accept what's in front
Right,
of us,
right,
which could even in some cases be death, right? And
right.
and that's a very difficult thing, and yet he allows us to cry out to him. He allows us to cry, to have sorrow. And
He
we
he
see a
wants
glimpse
us
of that.
to. Yeah,
We see Christ himself experiencing a range of emotions
right.
in the garden,
Yeah.
as
Sorrow and
part of
distress.
his process.
Yeah, yeah. And
Um,
his humanity, he's like us in all things but sin. He went through that, and he carried our fear with him too. I mean, he's carrying the burden of our iniquities, because we couldn't do that. So he was also carrying
mhm,
our stuff with that. So
mhm.
it's an amazing thing. So it's heartening to even talk about this. I mean, I feel like my heart getting bigger, and warmer and more open just talking about it. And we need to have these kind of conversations.
Are you saying your
And
heart grew like 3 times is too big?
the three times too big. No,
What
but
is
it's,
the?
that's I want that big open heart. I want that big open heart. And when
Yeah.
I isolate myself and I'm reading the blogs that I read, and the financials and the markets, and we've never been in this space before, blah blah blah, my heart gets small. It gets
Yeah.
small, and I do need some of that information, to be able to make good planning for my family and so forth. But it's got
Right.
to be limited, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's what that fasting is about, because that's one of the three pillars of Lent. There's prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. We're still in Lent, and so there can be fasting from information overload, right, or from
Right.
kinds of information. Talk about that in the blog. So
Yep.
um,
Well, we're just about
let's
to
check
go
that
into
out.
Holy Week,
Yeah,
and it should be interesting, and it'll be an interesting one if certain things aren't lifted. It's not looking like they will be, but
no,
so it will be a very interesting Easter. It'll be interestingly creative,
yeah.
but I think it's important. I mean, yeah, I wish it was different, but to me, I don't know. Am I strange? Like, I actually see the possibilities here of opportunities.
There are tremendous possibilities. That's what that whole podcast is about. The coronavirus crisis, Carpe Diem. That's a podcast I started just last week. It's about seizing the day, seizing the opportunities that present themselves here. Because if we really believe in Romans 8:28, all things work together for good for those who love the Lord, this whole situation is working together for the good too. And we just have
Yeah.
to find out how. We
Yeah.
have to ask that question and be open to it.
Hmm.
And we totally redid our website. And I'm super excited because Dr. Gerry's course is up now. So give us
Yes.
a little brief introduction to that, Dr. Gerry.
Yeah, this is a really comprehensive course. The courses that we've offered as free courses hopefully have been really helpful. This one is designed in 25 modules, so there's a lot in it. It is designed for couples where one of the members is struggled with the use of pornography, And so it's really a guide for both to heal and to restore the marriage.
Both the
And
husband
so
and the wife.
both husbands. So there's activities for the husband, activities for the wife, and for the husband and wife to do together throughout the program. There's some worksheets and activities to do. There's all kinds of marriage help in this, as well as an understanding of addiction for one person and for the trauma really of living with somebody, especially if you didn't know it was there, who is struggling with this and how it affects you. And so it's a husband and wife course. You can take it if you're just one of you wants to take it. That's possible. It's better for both, but if only one of you takes it, you'll get tons out of it. There's tons of marriage work in this. It's also, by the way, a great course. If you're single and you want to get married and you have an issue with pornography, you can get ahead of the game here, because this will give you stuff that you really should do before marriage to prevent the kind of thing that the course is actually designed for. So anyway, so it's filled with great information, and feel free to check that out on our website.
Right. Well, good.
All right.
Just to recap the takeaway, we're going to reach out to somebody else. You were saying reach out to somebody else, really put yourself in their shoes and, kind of understand what they're experiencing, and that'll be really good for your soul, that big open heart, So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that, Gerry.
Me too. I've been actually doing it already a little bit. I'm going to ramp it up.
Right.
Well, Dr. Peter, it's been good to see you. It's nice to connect in this world of social distancing that's going on right now. And we're here with you too, guys. And if you're with us, please join us on all the different, on Facebook, Twitter, wherever, but especially right here. Feel free to comment. And please check out our new website. We're so proud of it, excited about it. I mean, we're always improving. So God bless you, and be still.